I mean, so that's why we had that one single EC2 instance there. So then I figured out that the issue was actually with that particular EC2 instance. There was some saturation with the EC2 instance. So what I did was I increased the capacity to 2 EC2 instances in the auto scaling group to make it 2. So the moment I made it 2, so then immediately there was another EC2 instance that was provisioned, and as a result, the request started coming through, right? And in fact, I also did a cross check of this whole thing by creating another load balancer, right, and using the same targets behind that load balancer. I did all of that, but still I had an issue with the original EC2 instance that came up the other day. So I mean, in such cases, usually what you have to do is, I mean, I'm just explaining this to you so that you can use these techniques during your troubleshooting, right? So one is, obviously you'll have to look at all the network communications between the source and the target, and after that you'll have to thoroughly uh, verify and validate all the load balancer, auto scaling group configurations and EC2 configurations. And uh, if you are convinced that all the configurations at your end are fine, and still there are issues with that, then what you can do is you can always raise a support case with AWS, where one of the AWS support engineers from the support team will be able to look at actually what's happening. So obviously they won't have access to log into the EC2 instance, but AWS collects a lot of logs behind the scenes, and which they use at an EC2 instance level under the lowermost hypervisor and networking layer. So through that, they'll be able to tell you what is actually wrong with this EC2 instance, and sometimes they may say that terminate this EC2 instance and relaunch this, or stop it and relaunch this EC2 instance, right? So these are some of the subsequent steps that they'll ask you to do. But anyways, in this case, I didn't raise a support case. So what I did was I just launched a second EC2 instance, and so now the second EC2 instance is able to respond well, and in fact, I was able to get all the responses back from my load balancer. Right? So that's what I did. So there was nothing wrong with the configurations, and there was nothing wrong with the set of steps that we followed the other day. I mean, all those were fine, but it's probably something to do with the underlying EC2 instance, probably at a hypervisor layer or at the EC2 instance level. Something must have gone wrong. So that's the root cause analysis that I figured out. Okay, all right. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go clean up everything, right? I'm just going to go delete my auto scaling group, right? I'm just going to say delete, just say delete. We're going to start with the project. So let me just go ahead and delete. The moment I click on delete, it's going to actually start terminating all my EC2 instances. You will see that here shortly. So these are the 2 EC2 instances running as part of my auto scaling group, my ASG, right? Yeah, in a while, we should see that, these EC2 instances would actually go down. If I go here, if I go to the activity, yeah, first it's actually trying to drain the connections in the load balancer, because it has to serve the in-flight connections which are already there. So it's just trying to do that. So once it is done, then it will actually start terminating my EC2 instances. Yeah, I think, yeah, if you see this terminating, right? So let it wait, let it go ahead and terminate all the EC2 instances and do a cleanup. Let's not wait for this. But rather, what we are going to start today is we're actually going to do lab exercise on setting up a WordPress website on EC2 instances using an RDS as the backend. Okay, so that's what we are going to do today. And to begin with, what I want to do is I want to actually set up a. This is the tutorial that we are going to actually follow. Right? So this is a step-by-step hands-on lab that AWS actually offers in its public website. It's a intermediate level assignment with estimated time to complete is about 50 minutes, and which takes about it's a free tier is eligible to complete this assignment. And there are a few prerequisites, such as you need an AWS account. All of us have an AWS account, and you need some sort of a Chrome or Firefox, right? And this estimate assumes you follow the recommended configurations throughout the tutorial and terminate all resources upon completion, right? So if you see this, it says there's no cost to complete because it's covered under the free tier, provided you follow this recommended configurations throughout these 5 modules and clean up the entire assignment at the end of it, right? So that's the assumption that it takes. Okay, all right. So before we jump into this, right? What is a WordPress? A WordPress is basically content management system. Okay. So in fact, if you see, WordPress is a highly popular content management system that is used for over 30% of all the sites on the internet. 30% of most of the websites that you see on the internet uses WordPress in some shape or some form, right? In a customized way. Let's just click that. Go to this URL that it takes us to. Yeah, so if you see, this WordPress now powers more than 30% of websites. Yeah, you can just read this later. But I mean, here, there's a short article on how the data that is collected by one of the technology survey firms says that about 30% of the web is powered by WordPress, right? And WordPress is nothing but it's a content management system, right? So with which you'll be able to build websites, you'll be able to build CMS, and in fact a lot of organizations use it for their public websites and use it for their blog websites, right? And it's basically open source blogging software, right? So that you can make use of, and it's kind of, it has a lot of templates, it has a lot of ecosystem built around it, right? So you can read this article later. I'm not going to go spend my time on this right now. It is most commonly used for blogs, but can also be used for running e-commerce websites, message boards. For example, you want to build a e-commerce website of yourself, you can actually start with WordPress as the initial minimum viable product 1.0, right? You can actually start with this, and there are so many templates that's available for WordPress. Just go to WordPress.com. This is the publicly facing WordPress.com. It's where you can actually go, and you can also use to host it in WordPress. I mean, this is again, hosted and managed by WordPress itself, right? It's basically a community thing, and the software itself is open source, where you don't have to pay any license fees for using WordPress. But if you want to go ahead and host something here, you can just go click on login, and you can use your username, password. And what you can also do is you can go ahead and start creating your own website on the SaaS version. This is basically a software as a service version, where you can actually start building a website out here, right? By providing your email address, username, password. You can create your own account, and WordPress has got some pricing as well. If you're using the software as a service version, where if you use it just for personal use, it's about 160 rupees per month, where you get a free domain for 1 year. And you won't get the ads as compared to the free version, right? And unlimited email support. And if you go to premium, which is about 280 rupees per month, you get all these additional features. You can also use it for uploading videos. Google Analytics is integrated with this. If you go for business, it's 40 rupees per month. You get a lot more features. If you go for e-commerce, which is 1,152 rupees per month, you get all the features out here, right? Such as payments in 60 countries. You can use this to create your e-commerce website, and you can start merchandising your products through this. And it accepts payment in 60 plus countries. Yeah, so many things. It has automated site backups, but this is basically a software as a service version, right? But what if I don't want to use my software as a service version, right? I want to basically use WordPress and host my self-managed WordPress on AWS. using EC2 and RDS. Okay, using EC2 and RDS, right? So that is where we have this tutorial that we need to follow, and that what we are going to do now is we're actually going to deploy WordPress. It's an open source software, as I said, which runs on HTTPD. Right? We know HTTPD, right? We know Apache Web Server, and it runs on Apache Web Server. Sorry, just give me a second, please. Yeah, sorry about that. So what we are going to do is to use HTTPD, which is Apache Web Server. So now all of us know how to use an Apache Web Server to deploy our HTML pages, deploy our web server web components, and serve it over internet. And WordPress uses Apache as its front end, which is the web server application server, and it uses MySQL as the backend because it's a content management system, right? So you need some sort of backend database for your website to run, correct? Or for your web application to run. So that it uses MySQL as its backend, and it's called LAMP stack, right? How many of you know what a LAMP stack is? LAMP. Can somebody talk about LAMP stack? What is LAMP stack?
Linux, SQL, and Apache with one more thing. Programming.
Okay. Good. You're partially right. So LAMP stands for L as in Linux, A as in Apache, right? It uses Apache web server, which we all know. M as in MySQL, P as in PHP, right? So this is a very famous stack that is used by application developers, by organizations all over the world, right? So if you just search for LAMP stack, you will get this, right? So LAMP stack is a very famous combination of all these, right? I mean, now earlier it used to be just PHP, later now it's become Perl, and Python is also added to this. Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, Perl, Python is an acronym denoting one of the most common solution stacks for many of the web's most popular applications. However, LAMP now refers to a generic software stack, largely interchangeable, right? So, I mean, yeah, so this is what it takes, right? So this is basically the architecture. So it uses backend database as MySQL, the application component, backend component as something like PHP, Python, or Perl, and web server as Apache. Okay, so that's what, and it runs on Linux. That's called LAMP stack. So now WordPress uses LAMP stack, right? It's basically a PHP application. Okay, it runs on Apache web server using HTML, and it uses MySQL as its backend database component. Okay, so that's the thing. So what we're going to do now is, it's very simple. We're going to deploy a WordPress website with Amazon RDS by following this step-by-step instructions. What will you learn? Right, in this lab, you will learn how to set up a WordPress site to run a blog. WordPress requires a MySQL database to store its data. For this lab, you will use Amazon RDS for MySQL to run your MySQL databases. Why this matters? Database maintenance for your WordPress site is critical because all the data is stored there, right? I mean, if you don't maintain your database well, your website will face frequent outages, which is not good for your business, correct? Your database instance holds all of your important data for your WordPress site. If the database goes down, your website may go down with it, or even you could lose your data. Database maintenance can be difficult, and database administrators have years of specialized experience when setting up a WordPress site. You want to stay focused on designing your page and generating your content, not worrying about the database performance and backups. That is the reason we are going to use Amazon RDS for MySQL. Helps with both of these problems. Is a managed database offering from AWS, etc., etc. Yeah. Okay, all right. So these are the 5 modules that we're actually going to complete. So this is just step 1 of the project. I would say this is the part 1 of the project. So I want all of you to do this part 1 of the project. Then I'm going to increase the complexity of this in the part 2 of this project 1, not today, but in our subsequent sessions on Monday. Okay, but because last time I started with part 2 directly, and a lot of our students struggled with it because they were not able to understand it conceptually. So this time I just flipped the order. I'm just going to start with this as the first step, where you will understand, how to configure a WordPress website on an EC2 instance and connect it to a backend RDS. And then as a next step, I'm going to add more flavor to it. I'm going to add more garam masala to the project. We're saying that, okay, so now let's make it fault tolerant, and let's use auto scaling group, and let's use a load balancer, and let's make it a full-fledged production ready website. Okay, that's the step 2 of the project. But for to be successful in the step 2 of the project, you should complete this. Okay, so let's get started with this. Creating a MySQL database with RDS. This is the first thing that we are going to do. We are going to first create the database, the backend RDS database. Time to complete is 5 minutes. Okay. All right. Let me just take a separate tab of this. Okay. And I'm going to go here. Okay. I'm going to close all the other tabs. This be open. Okay. I'm going to close all the other tabs. Okay. I think the EC2 instances would have got terminated. If you see, yeah, it's got terminated, right? And I'm also going to go clean up all my load balancers that were created. Let me just delete these target groups. I don't need this any longer. Delete. Currently using listener. Okay, just go ahead and delete these 2 load balancers. Delete. Yes, delete. Deleted target groups. Just go delete. Delete. Yes, all cleaned up. I don't have any auto scaling group. Nothing. It's a clean slate at this point in time. Yeah, and no EC2 instances. Okay, let's first start with this, right? At this point, you've created an RDS database and an EC2 instance. In this module, we will configure the RDS database to allow access to specific entities, right? So this is what we're going to do. What you will need, what you will learn, how to create a MySQL database for your WordPress website, why WordPress needs MySQL database, and why Amazon RDS is a good choice. You can read more about it later on, but without much of a thing, let me go. First, we are going to create a MySQL RDS instance using the RDS console, and just go to RDS. Okay, and by the way, in the Mumbai region. Yeah, I'm here. So let me just go to databases. Just say create database. Okay, and it's important that you just follow these instructions. Okay, whatever is given here, right? Otherwise, if you don't follow these instructions step by step, you will end up provisioning a wrong one, which will incur cost on your account. Please don't do that. Okay, so now what it says standard create, select MySQL. Okay, and then use the free tier, right? So this all of us are aware of, right? How to do this. You can just go select the free tier. Don't forget to select the free tier, and then in the settings for the database instance identifier, give it as WordPress. Yes, I've given it, and give credentials as admin. Right? For admin, give a password. Okay, you can just give a password there. I'm just going to go with the just password PASSWRD. Just to keep it simple, PASSWRD, just to keep it simple. So then out here, db.t2.micro is selected. Yeah, please continue with that. Storage, don't change the storage, just keep it GP2 20 GB. And okay, here you have enabled storage auto scaling. You can keep it on or you can turn it off. That's okay, it doesn't matter. And just to be on safer side, just because when you provision this and when you actually work with this lab, if a hacker gets hold of your website, he may actually start exploiting your website, and then your auto scaling might scale up to 1 terabyte. Okay, that's why as a best practice, I go ahead and disable it, so that way I still stay within my free tier of 20 GB, right? Otherwise, what will happen is the hacker might pump in more data to your website, and automatically the backend storage might auto scale, which I don't want to happen in my case. I've just gone ahead and disabled the storage auto scaling. Multi-AZ is not enabled because it's just a free tier. And choose, okay, out here there's an additional configuration, correct? Okay, choose your VPC as my VPC, right? So that's the only VPC that I have, and just leave the default VPC subnet group as is. And public access, don't give public access because you don't need to give public access, right? Just leave it no, because I want my RDS to be available only within a private subnet. Okay, next you can configure network configuration must be created and which is logically separate. VPCs are an advanced, it's okay. Finally, RDS provides a number of additional configurations to customers. You need to take one change in this area, click on additional configurations. Okay, yeah, I mean, this tutorial doesn't speak about a private RDS or a public RDS, but you don't make it public, just make it private. So because your database is not exposed to the internet, it's only your web service is exposed to the internet. And for a security group, what you need to do is you just need to go create a new security group, right? So that says, I think subsequently, we'll actually come to a security group configurations in the next steps. For now, you can just leave it default. Okay, come back, just leave it default. Availability zone, just leave it default because it's anyways not going to be public. So, or you can just select 1B, right? So that's okay. And if you select the additional configuration, it's 3306, and it can be password authentication. And here in the additional configuration, they're asking you to create the database as WordPress, right? Initial database name is WordPress. Okay, and the DB parameter group, right now it is 8.0 is the latest version. So this is using a slightly older version of the database. Just and then click the orange button, create database, right? So just go ahead and remove this enable automated backups. I don't want any backups, right? I don't want to incur any additional costs. Just remove the automated backups and just leave the rest of it as default. Just go create the database. Okay, so it's creating. Let it create. Okay, let it create. It'll take a few minutes to provision this. And let me go to module 2. Module 2 is you need to now create an EC2 instance and install WordPress on it, right? Okay, let's go and take step by step. Let me go to EC2. Okay, so out here, I'm going to launch a new instance as per the steps that's given here. I'm going to use Amazon Linux 2 AMI, as I've selected Amazon Linux 2 AMI, and I'm going to use e2.micro, which is free tier. Okay, next configure instance details. Okay, so out here, you have to provision it in the public subnet. Okay, that's all not mentioned explicitly out here because they have left it to the discretion of the user who's actually trying to do this lab. Because if I want, I can still provision it in a private subnet and I can front end it with a load balancer. I think those steps are not mentioned yet, but anyways, I assume that you're all masters in that, so you don't have to worry about it. So create it in a public subnet, create the EC2 instance in a public subnet, and click on next, add storage, just leave it default. Tags, just say name as WordPress site, my WordPress site. Okay, that's the name that I'm giving. Next, configure the security group, right? So here, the security group that I want to create is to allow SSH traffic and HTTP traffic, correct? These are the two things that I need to allow. Let me check if I have a security group that says allow the in fact, I created sometime earlier which allows, anyways, let me go ahead and create a new one for your sake. I'm going to say my WordPress -sg. That's the name that I'm going to give. My WordPress SG, right? Which will allow port 22 on 0000 because we need that to connect using PuTTY or SSH and install the WordPress website on that, right? So for that, we need to allow port 22 and we also need to allow HTTP so that users can start accessing it from the public, right? That's what I'm doing. Just go review and launch and use your PEM file or PPK file and acknowledge launch instance. Okay, so let it launch the EC2 instance. It's going to launch this EC2 instance. It's still pending state. If you observe, it will have a public IP address because I provisioned it in a public subnet. Okay, that's what I did. Okay, all right. Let me just come back. Okay, yeah, it's all launched now. So now let me go to configuring the RDS instance. Hopefully the RDS instance would be ready by now. Let me go back to RDS. So now let the EC2 instance get provisioned. In the meantime, let me check what is the status of my RDS instance, which got provisioned. I'm just going to the RDS console. Let me open up the databases. Yeah, it is still creating. If you see, it's still creating. Let's just give it a minute or two for this RDS instance to be up and running and be available. Yeah, it's available now. Okay, it's done. So now as a next step, what we are going to do is we are actually going to, secure our database. Okay, so now here, so now this RDS is provisioned in my private subnet, correct? That's what it's provisioned in. I've provisioned it only in my private subnet in South 1B. So that's where I've provisioned it. So now what I can do is I need to change my security group rules for my RDS to allow the traffic to come only from my EC2 instance. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So click on that. If you go here, you will see a default security group associated with that. So now what we need to do is we need to go back to EC2. Yeah, it's actually taking you to the security group out here. Okay, so now what it says is it asks you to change the default security group rule to allow all the inbound traffic from other instances in the default security group. Okay, so rather we are going to do it slightly differently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go create a new security group. Let me just go open the VPC console. Go to security groups. If you remember, we created a new security group for my EC2 instance, right? For the WordPress EC2 instance, right? So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go create a new security group and call it My RDS. Okay, let me be consistent in the naming convention. This is the name that I gave for this one, right? So My WordPress. This is the name that I gave. So let me use, in fact, I missed the press out here. It's okay. Let me just go My WordPress RDS security group. So that's the name that I'm going to give. This is My WordPress RDS SG. Okay, VPC is going to be this VPC inbound rules. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow only MySQL port for my inbound rules, right? So you can actually search for MySQL or Aurora, right? So just search for that because it's running on 3306. And what is the source that it needs to come from? It needs to come from my VPC, within my VPC, right? Either I can give my VPC CIDR range, or you can use a self-referential security group, right? Where I'm going to use my WordPress security group, which is the security group of the EC2 instance, correct? So what this means is all the EC2 instances which has got this security group will be able to access the resources that are attached to the security group. Okay, that's what this means, right? So you can actually use, this is called a self-referential way of dealing with security groups, where either you can give the VPC CIDR range 10.0.0.0/16, or you can use the security group of the EC2 instances that we created earlier, okay, which is the My WordPress security group. That's what I'm doing here. And outbound, you can just leave all traffic and just say create security group. Yeah, this security group is created now. So now if I go here and I can just go ahead and modify it. If you go inside the database, RDS database, and click on modify, so if you come down, you will go to security groups here, remove the default security group and choose the security group that we created, which is the WordPress-RDS-security group. Okay, that's the security group that I'm allowing. Okay, and then let me just go ahead and say continue. Just apply the settings immediately, right? So that's what I want to do. Continue. Yeah, just say apply immediately. Don't, you have to read the configurations properly out here, right? It says, when do you want to modify this? You want to modify it immediately or during the next maintenance window, which the next maintenance window is tomorrow. Okay, so if you don't notice this, and if you just go and modify DB instance, then your changes will not take into effect immediately. Then you will keep troubleshooting, you'll break your head, and it will not be applied immediately. So you have to read. So just read this and say apply immediately, right? So every step, just read it carefully, understand what it says, and take an appropriate action and then move forward. Just click on modify DB instance. Yes. So now if you go back and if you see here, my default security group is being removed and the new security group is being added here. Okay. Alrighty. So let's go back. Okay, that's done. So this step is done. Okay, so now let's SSH into my EC2 instance. Okay. So it is modifying immediately. So let it modify. In the meantime, let me just open another tab and go to EC2. The newly provisioned EC2 instance, which is this one, my WordPress website. This is the public IP address. Let me open a SSH. Okay, all right. So first thing that you need to do is just do sudo su, elevate yourself to root user. Now just do yum update -y. These are all standard best practices, right? You just update all the packages in it so that the software and the operating system is up to date. So just do an yum update -y so that it updates all the packages of the kernel of the operating system, right? So it's completely patched now. So we are all safe. By the way, how many of you are following the Log4j incident that is going on currently? Log4j. What is Log4j? People who have learned Java will know about it. No?
Like version, sir?
No. There's a Log4j incident that is going on right now. What is that Log4j incident?
It has some. It has some bugs. Like now, this all Chrome and Apple users will use it, but it has a major bug, which is now the hackers will be hacking. So we need to update all our some Chrome browsers and all that.
Okay, what is Log4j? You're right. You're partially right. But what is Log4j?
For logging, sir. I don't know exactly, but for logging, yes, sir.
No, it is not for logging in. It is for logging. It is not login. It's not an authentication library. It is for logging. What is logging? So when you build applications, you will want to log that certain activities happening in your application in a log file, right? So that you can use that log file for troubleshooting, and you can use that log file in multiple different ways. That's called
I think
logging.
vulnerability
LOGG.
fixing, sir.
Yeah, correct. It's a vulnerability. So it's called logging. Okay. Okay. Logging is okay. Logging. Yeah, logging software means it is a way to record everything, all the events that occur in the operating system or other software. It records everything. That is called logging. So by the way, Log4j, it's a library. It's a Java library. It's called Log4j. It's a library that is built. It's an open source library, which is an Apache license open source library, which is a Java-based logging library, which developers usually use it in their application and use this to log all the events, all the messages into using this library. Otherwise, you have to write all this from scratch, right? So it's a reusable library which is available. You just use it and use this library to. It's a common library that is being used. That's called Log4j. Now, what's happening is recently there was it's a very common library. Every Java application would actually use this Log4j as its underlying logging library. So recently there was a vulnerability that was observed in this logging library where it uses JNDI, okay, Java directory interface, okay, it's called JNDI. It basically exploits the JNDI to gain access, to allow an hacker to gain access and perform some malicious code, perform some malicious activities through this vulnerability. By the way, this is one of the critical vulnerabilities that shook the entire industry in this decade. Okay. By the way, there's something called rating that is given. So it's in the scale of 10 out of 10. It's like an earthquake in the Richter scale, right? Where if you get 8.1 in the Richter scale, it means it's a very severe earthquake. Similarly, in the cyber security world, there's a rating that is given to such vulnerabilities, so which is in the scale of 0 to 10. So this particular vulnerability, they have rated it as 10 out of 10, which is the very critical, very severe, and in this case it's actually threatening millions of computers across the world. Okay. So now so I mean, these are some things that you need to follow, correct? I mean, just go through and learn about this. And if you just go Log4j and hit news, you will get a lot of news articles on this. Just read about it, okay, and how bad it is and how it is actually threatening the security of the millions of Java applications that is running in the world. Okay. So by the way, the reason why I'm coming to that is, so it's important you patch your operating system and libraries to its latest versions, so that you don't run into. And immediately what the Log4j team community did was they immediately patched, released a hotfix for this. And that was taken by a lot of developers across the world, and a lot of applications got patched because of this. Okay, anyways,
Last
coming
time,
back, in fact,
last time ransomware is attacked from this way, sir. Actually,
correct.
Rans
I mean, hackers may make use of this to create ransomwares and ask for money. What they can do is, imagine you are building a Java application which is storing credit card details, which is storing personally identifiable information. And what a hacker can do is, hacker can exploit this vulnerability of Log4j. He can get into your application. He can go to your database, steal all the personal information, credit card details and everything. And he may threaten the website owner or the application owner, saying that, give me $10 million. Otherwise, I will expose all this information on the internet and all the credit card details will go away, right? I mean, imagine, right? I mean, hacker getting hold of 10 million credit card details. I mean, he can do anything with it, correct? So that's called ransomware, basically. Okay, anyways, coming back. So it's important you do it. And the last time such a vulnerability happened was called Heartbleed. Okay, Heartbleed is the vulnerability that came. It's called Heartbleed bug. Okay, which is on the Open SSL. SSL, all of us know, right? It's 443. Port 443 secure sockets layer, right? TLS, it uses TLS protocol on the TCP/IP. So it happened 9 years ago, 2012, right? So this was actually a very, very severe vulnerability again back then. Now, after about 9 years, Log4j vulnerability has again propped up. Okay, and this vulnerability, Heartbleed vulnerability, Heartbleed was a name given to it because millions and millions of websites use HTTPS, correct? I mean, even this website is using HTTPS. So here, because of a issue that was in the Open SSL library, cryptographic library, hackers could basically gain access to the private memory space of the application through this vulnerability. So this was identified, and immediately, the patch was given for this. And in fact, it was an Indian who discovered this vulnerability called Neil Mehta. And read about this, right? Read about both Heartbleed and the Log4j vulnerabilities. It's very interesting. Okay, going back. So now I have patched my EC2 instance. It's up to date. So let me go back to my tutorial and see what the next step that I need to do. Okay, so now we need to actually install some softwares in it. Okay, so let's just follow these steps. So I'm going to install the MySQL client on my web server, which is going to host my WordPress. So just install this MySQL client. It's installed. Okay. Now, if you go back to your RDS, you will find an endpoint, correct, in your RDS. So let's go back to RDS console. Click on this. Yeah, it's modified now. The WordPress security group is also modified. Now grab this WordPress endpoint and come back. Okay, come back to your EC2 instance and run this command. Export MySQL _host equal to this endpoint. Okay, it's basically creating a environment variable called export MySQL _host equal to, that's what it says, right? MySQL _host equal to the RDS endpoint. You have to replace that with an RDS endpoint. So just do this. It's done. So now if you say echo @MySQL _host, it's actually going to, sorry, just say MySQL host, not @. Is it @ or what is it? It's hash or dollar. Okay, it's dollar actually. Sorry, it's echo $MySQL host will actually give this value. Okay, that's what we want. Okay, so now come back. So then what you also need to do is you have to run the following command in your terminal to connect your MySQL database. Replace user and password with the master username and password you configured when creating your database, right? So just say MySQL --user equal to, give the username, which is admin, --password equal to your password, which is just password. And you also have to give the database name that you created called WordPress. Okay, what it does is it connects using this admin and password to this WordPress. Okay, and the host is already set using the environment variable here, right? It looks for this particular MySQL host, and then it connects to this particular host. See, it's connected. Okay, it's connected because we changed the security group to allow any traffic coming from the EC2 instance through the previous step. So now you can say show databases. It shows all the databases. Use WordPress. These are all MySQL commands. Okay. You use this and show tables. Just say show tables. We'll show all the tables. Right now, I have nothing. It's a blank database that I have. Correct. Okay, all right. Let me just exit out of this. Okay, now we know that it's connected. So you get this prompt and it's all connected. Okay, so now what you need to do is you also need to create a user within the MySQL database. So again, reconnect and execute this command: create user WordPress identified by WordPress password. Okay, this is the password that we are giving. Just do that. So it created a user. Sorry, please go on mute. Yeah, and then grant all privileges on WordPress. So all these steps are basically creating a new user within the WordPress database, within the MySQL database called WordPress, identified by this password. And then you're granting all privileges on WordPress to WordPress user. That's what you're doing, nothing else. Just follow these steps and flush all the privileges so that it again reloads everything and then say exit. That's it. Now everything is done. So it says you should use a better password than WordPress-pass to secure database. That's okay. That's fine. So now we know the username, which is WordPress. The password is WordPress-password. So now in this module, you learned how to configure network and password security for your RDS database. Your EC2 instance now has network access to your RDS instance. In the next module, you will configure your EC2 instance to run the WordPress application. Okay. The next module is, let's configure WordPress on my EC2 instance that I created. Okay. So now the first step is create a install the Apache web server using this command. This all of us are aware of it, of this command. Sudo m install -. Okay, so it's installed. Yes, all right. But HTTPD is installed. Then I'm going to start the HTTPD web server using this command. Okay, it started. Now you can say sudo service HTTPD status. It is running. Okay, it's running. So perfect. So now clear the screen. Okay, so now you can see that your Apache web server is working and that your security groups are configured correctly by visiting the public DNS. Okay, this all of us know, right? So if I go to my EC2 instance, grab my IP address or public DNS and hit here, it gives me this test page. Okay, so now my Apache web server is running properly without any issues. Okay, already. So now come back, you see this test page. So now you have to download and configure WordPress software. Okay, in order to download, you have to follow these steps. wget is a command which will download files from internet. So if you go back to your EC2 instance, I'm in the EC2 user. Okay, so now just say wget http. So now this will download the latest version of WordPress. Okay, so if you see it's downloaded, this is the latest tar.gz is a compressed file. Okay, tar is a compressed file, like zip files, right? It's a compressed file. Okay, and then what you do is use this command to, unzip this latest.tar.gz. Okay, go back, run this command. Yeah, so now if you see, it would have unzipped this whole contents of this latest.tar.gz into this WordPress directory. So if you just go to WordPress directory, you will see all the contents of this WordPress website. All the PHP files. I said it's a PHP application, correct? Okay, just go back. Okay, all right, just you will see these two files in it. Okay, so now if you go inside CD WordPress and list it, so now what you need to do is you need to actually there's a configuration that you need to do on the WordPress, because you need to use the database, correct? You need to use the RDS database for your WordPress. So you need to do some configurations on the WordPress, which is what we are going to do now. If you see, by default, WordPress ships with a sample configuration file. you need to rename it or copy it to a new file called wp-config. That is what this command does. Just execute this command. So what it does is it actually makes a copy of this wp-config sample to wp-config.php. Now you open this in a editor, Nano. Okay. And you have to make a bunch of changes out here. Okay, what are those changes? Let's do those. Yeah. So if you go here, you have to replace all of this with these values. Okay, database name should be WordPress. Just edit this. WordPress. Database user is also WordPress, right? That's the username that we gave, correct? In the previous module. WordPress. Password is, you have to make a note of that password, but I use the standard password. So let me just go ahead and copy that password, whatever I gave. In the previous module. Oops. Okay. So let me just expand this and look for what the password that we gave. Password that I gave is WordPress-task. Okay. Just come back. Yeah, and DB host is supposed to be okay. Use the host name of the database that you found in the previous module. That is from here. You have to copy this endpoint and paste it here. Okay, so this is all done. So now the database connectivity portion is taken care of. So the next thing that we need to take care of is the authentication key, correct? So what each WordPress deployment has is it has some sort of a unique authentication. It's called the salt, okay? Unique keys and salts that it uses. So what you need to do is you need to actually get your unique version of keys and salts by clicking this link. If you go to this link, open it in a new tab, okay, you will get this. It's an API call. It will generate a unique authentication key, secure authentication key, and all of this, right? So just copy this whole thing. Okay. Come back here, right? You can replace the entire content in that section with the content from this link. So once you click this link, you will be taken to this page. Copy this whole thing, press Ctrl-A, Ctrl-C. Come back to your Nano. Okay. And out here, just paste this whole thing, right? So just go to this thing and paste this whole thing. And you have to delete all of this, right? So you have to basically delete all of this. So just I'm going to delete this. Okay, in fact, there is a way to delete the entire line. There's a shortcut to delete the entire line. I think it's called Control K, is it? Control K. Yeah, Control K, just press Control K. You delete this whole line. And so now my WordPress installation has got these unique keys, right? Without these unique keys, it won't work. The software won't work. Okay, so now it's all done. So now just go ahead and save this file. Yes, I want to save this file. Yeah, it is saved. So if you want, you can just cross check it by again opening Nano. Just verify everything is in place. Username, password, endpoint is in place. And all my authentication keys, salt, everything is in place. Okay, cool. All right, so now it is done. So now with all these configurations, you can make your WordPress website live. So now you have to deploy the WordPress. Before deploying the WordPress, you have to install PHP modules in your EC2 instance, right? So just use this command to install the PHP modules. Okay, what it does is it installs all the Amazon Linux extras. LAMP stack is something that it installs some of these libraries, PHP libraries it installs. Okay, just install it. Okay, it's done. So next thing that we need to do is you have to go to cd home/ec2 user. That is where you are. Okay, I think you're already there. And right now, when go to cd/ec2 user. Okay, and I'm here. Okay, so now what you need to do is you need to copy this whole thing, WordPress folder to my Apache web server folder, which is /var www.html. So just copy this whole thing. Yeah, it's copied. So now if I go to cd/var www.html, see, you will see this WordPress website completely copied over here, and you will have this index.php, which will serve the main content. So now just go ahead and restart the HTTPD service once. Yeah, it's restarted. Okay, so now if you go and refresh your web page of your EC2 instance. Okay, let me just grab the DNS endpoint of the EC2 instance. Yeah, you will see this page, right? The WordPress website is up and running, but it will ask you to do a first time setup of your EC2 of your WordPress website, right? So that's what it gives you. So you go and you basically make this, complete this configuration. You just go here, site title is RPL blog website. So that's the name that I'm going to do. Username, I just say admin. Password, I'll just say password is the password. That's okay, it's weak. Confirm use of weak password. And I'm just going to give some email address, right? Just in order to use a temp email, just use temp email, which will just give you some temporary email. Just use it so that you expose your email address to any. Yeah, so just take this temporary email address. Okay, what this does is it creates a temporary email address, which is disposable in nature. You can use it for all your test purposes and things like that, right? So, right. So now let me just go use that email address here. Yeah, and say install WordPress. Yeah, so now WordPress is installed. Just log in using your admin and password that you just did in the previous step. Just log in. Okay, so now you will get this screen, right? So here you can actually go ahead and write your first blog post. Just click on write your first blog post. Just close this, right? I'll just say hello. This is site cited journey. blah, 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 right? Just do this, and you can use some templates for those nice templates and so on and so forth. That's okay. Just go ahead and publish it. Just go ahead and publish it. Yeah, it's done. So now you can actually copy this link, and I can open another browser window and say, just go to this. This is my actual public facing blog. Yeah, you see this? The blog is up and running now. Right? In fact, if I just go and use this, right? I'll just get my blog out here, right? So now I can actually ping this to all of you. You can also try accessing it from your side. Yeah, I've just pinged this URL. Just access it. You will see the blog site. It's a publicly facing blog site. And it will probably ask you to log in as well. But yeah, if you log in using admin, then you can write content. Otherwise, if you just log in using the DNS name, it will simply show the publicly facing blog site, and you can customize this entire blog site. You can launch your own blog site on an EC2 instance and on RDS, right? So now all the content that I create here actually goes into my RDS. That's the way it works. Okay, so now if I go back, just go here. Yeah, so now that's it. You have a live publicly accessible WordPress installation using a fully managed MySQL database on RDS. It's done. So are you all able to access it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We're
Yes,
able
sir.
to access it, but it hasn't asked to the login, sir.
No. Login is only for the content. I'm the admin, right? It's my website. It's my blog site. I am the admin. So only I can use admin password to log into my website and create content or moderate content. Correct? But you are actual users of my blog site. You're like reading my blog. Okay. You are
Okay.
consumers. I'm the creator. So that's why it will not ask you for, the username password.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is what I want all of you to do today. Right. I've got this. Okay. So now last thing, right? Let's also go ahead and clean it up. So go to step 5. Okay. You can just do first remove your EC2 instance. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. First, let me go select my EC2 instance, actions, sorry, instance state, terminate instance. Boom. Okay, it's gone. So now if I go down, refresh it, it won't work. Okay, it's done. Next step is delete your RDS instance. Okay, so let me just go to my RDS console, select the database, say actions, delete. I don't want to create a final snapshot. Okay, I don't want to add any additional thing. I'll just say delete me, delete, boom. Okay, this is also gone. Okay, both the resources are gone. So now I am free of any additional cost that might come my way. Okay, that's it. That's it for the first part of the project 1. There's also a second part. As I said, there is a prologue and epilogue to this whole story. I will come to the epilogue part later on Monday. But right now, just complete this. I'm sure this is a pretty simple, straightforward, step by step. Okay, you just need to take care of the security groups and choosing the right VPC, choosing the right subnets. Remember, you create your RDS in a private subnet. You create the EC2 instance in the public subnet, so that EC2 instance is accessible by everybody. Okay, so that's it. So I'm going to give you this exercise, and you continue with this. Okay, but now there's also a second part to today's agenda, right? Which is about building your resumes, right? So now I don't know how many of you have built your resumes, right? So can someone volunteer to raise your hands and walk us through your resume that you've already built? or folks who are
Yeah,
already
sir.
working right now, right? I mean, a lot of you are actually working and have landed in some offers and landed in some jobs, right? So can one of
Sir,
you?
actually, I have a resume. I have used a template, sir.
No problem. Can you walk through? Can you share your screen and walk through?
Yeah, sir. Just a second.